Household food insecurity and increasing food prices have been a systemic challenge in South Africa for decades. The COVID-19 pandemic and the resultant lockdown has exposed, brought into public view, the fault lines of inequality in accessing sufficient and nutritious food, as we saw long queues of people seeking food aid. A major contributor to the increase in food insecurity during the lockdowns have been increasing food prices without a comparable increase in household incomes. Over the 9-month period, we saw the cost of our food basket increase by 10%. We need to remember that most South Africans are net buyers of food. We source our food in supermarkets, and in order to access that food, we need money, we need cash. How much money we have and the price of the foods that we buy determines whether households can access sufficient and nutritional food to meet their nutritional needs. Access to food also tells us something about the deficit in wages and in incomes, as well as how our economy is doing. The Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Household Affordability Index tracks food price inflation for low-income households in South Africa. We track the price inflation of 44 basic foods that women in low-income households tell us, through means of focus groups around the country, tell us they typically try and buy each month, should they have sufficient money. The quantities in our food basket are designed for a household of 7 persons, the average number of people in low-income households in South Africa. Because women do the shopping, women prepare the meals, women make the decisions on the food budget, they are best placed to provide the data that we receive. And so women data collectors collect food price data at 44 supermarkets and 30 butcheries that target low-income households in Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, Pietermaritzburg, and in Springbok in the Northern Cape. What is in our basket? As I've mentioned before, our basket contains 44 foods. Amongst these are 30 kgs of maize meal, 10 kgs of rice, 10 kgs of cake flour, 5 kgs of sugar beans, 5 liters of cooking oil, 10 kgs of potatoes, 10 kgs of onions, 6 kgs of tomatoes, 25 loaves of brown bread. All foods absolutely necessary for low-income households. Now let us have a look at food price inflation during the COVID period. When we look at November 2019, a year ago, the cost of that basket of 44 foods was $204. By March of 2020, as the COVID-19 lockdown was implemented across the country, our basket cost $211, an increase of $7 between November 2019 and March 2020. By November 2020, this month, the cost of that basket has increased to $233. This means that during the 9 months of the COVID-19 lockdown, the price of our basket of food has increased by $22 or 10% in value. When we look at the cost of our basket year on year, November 2019 to November 2020, we then see that the cost of the basket has increased by $29 or 14%. When we compare wage increases over the same period, then we see that the national minimum wage has increased year on year by 3.4%, while our basket of food has increased by 14%. As the price of food is increasing much faster than wage inflation, then it becomes incumbent on households to have to cut back on the amount of food that they consume or the nutritional value of the food that they consume. The main driver of our food inflation have been the core or staple foods. So for instance, maize meal increased by 14%, rice increased by 29%, sugar beans increased by 60%, cooking oil increased by 16%, potatoes increased by a whopping 70% over this 9-month period, and 25 loaves of brown bread increased by 21%. And so what are the implications of this continuing food price increases without comparable increase in household income? Women tell us that they must buy the core foods, no matter the price. You have to buy maize meal, you have to buy rice, you have to buy potatoes and onions in order to cook a meal to put on the plate. And so when the price of these core foods increase, without income also increasing, then they have to buy less food or less nutritional food. So they drop out of the trolley foods such as meat, milk, fresh produce, food rich in nutrition, food rich in iron, calcium, protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. The only foods that get bought are the foods that fill the tummies, but largely only contain starch and sugar. And so the plates in low-income households gets whiter and nutritional diversity disappear from the plates. What are the implications of continuously increasing food prices? Firstly, in a time of a pandemic, we need our immune system in order to fight the virus should we contract it. Not having sufficient nutrition means that our immune system becomes compromised and will not be able to fight the virus should we contract it. We are more likely to end up with non-communicable diseases. Diseases such as high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, which are all the result of chronic undernutrition. Women in South Africa have the highest statistics for non-communicable diseases. Why women? Because they tell us they eat last. And by the time they dish food for themselves, all the best nutrition have been dished up for the children and other members of the household. We also require good nutrition for economic growth and productivity. Because if you are hungry, hungry workers are not innovative, and hungry workers cannot be productive. And so all our socio-economic and development outcomes has at its basis good nutrition in the household. It is cheaper to resist illness through the plate than through increasing investment in hospitals and healthcare. Undernutrition means that we do not get the value of the investment that we as a country make in education, because hungry children cannot learn. Stunted children cannot learn properly. And in South Africa, we already have about 30% of boy children, 25% of girl children under the age of 25 who are stunted. Those children are more likely to enter the workforce as laborers, more likely to earn lower wages than other workers, and more likely not to be able to afford sufficient and nutritional food for their children. And so the intergenerational cycle of poverty continues, because our socio-economic and development outcomes is based on good nutrition. Food is at the basis of our human need. But in a market economy such as ours, accessing sufficient and nutritious food is dependent on how much money I have in the pocket and the price of the food I wish to purchase. What we have seen during COVID-19 is that food price inflation rises much faster and much steeper than does wages and household incomes. And this results in the inequality in access to sufficient and nutritious food for low-income households. And so if we are to move to a new society beyond COVID-19, we are going to have to become extremely serious to provide each and every household sufficient and nutritious food. And that will require having the income to purchase that food, because South Africans are net buyers of food. We will require food price stability, and we will require increased wages. Those are the only means through which we will be able to bridge the levels of inequality that exist in our society today.